Thank you, Hans. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to present to you... We have an audio problem? Oh, there we are. There we are. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Hans. I would like to present to you, as you are all diehards of this FIAT IFTA World Conference, I would like to present to you the results of the FIAT IFTA Where Are You on the Timeline survey. Now, this will be about figures and statistics. That's one thing that's very important. Also, another thing that I should mention is that the results of this timeline survey were gathered by me, myself, Eva Liz Green, the President, current Chair of the Media Management Commission, and Adrienne Warburton of RTE, and of course by you, because you have filled out the survey, and I would like to thank you for that. So let's go to the results. But before we do so, I first want to explain you what actually the whole scope of the thing is. Can I have the next slide, please? So what are we doing with the timeline? It's a representation. That's the essence of it. It's the representation of what stage that we are all in when it comes to the journey. The title of this conference itself is the journey towards digital archiving, in terms of 5 questions basically that we have asked to you. Preservation, a question about the preservation format, about the content management system, access, metadata creation, the way you create your metadata, and a new one that we've added this year is about your connection to your audience, your public. Now, the very essence of the whole thing is that you tell us where you are, and FIAT IFTA allows you to compare. So this survey thing actually serves 3 purposes. It helps you, as FIAT IFTA members, to compare with your neighbors and to see where you are on the digital journey. But it also helps us, FIAT IFTA, in a sense that it allows us to understand where you are, and thus to bring relevant information to you. For example, if we are selecting themes for our next year's FIAT IFTA Media Management Seminar, we will have a close look to the results of the survey and see what could be relevant in your region and bring that kind of interesting information and interesting sessions, talks, panels, presentations to you. So that's the main purpose of this timeline survey. Now, I would like to disclaim, and I'd like to quote Benjamin Disraeli, although my friend Google says that also Mark Twain could be attributed for this quote. So lies, damn lies, and statistics. We have to be careful. You will see the figures around, and of course you can hide a lot with the statistics, and it can also say a lot, but we'll see. So the results of the first slide that I would like to show is the number of responses that we've got. We've got 47 responses, which is quite a nice deal, but I would like you to encourage, on the FIAT IFTA website, there is still the link to the form. And if you didn't do it up till now, please do so. Fill out the survey, click the link on the FIAT IFTA website. It's right in front. You should easily find it, and fill out a survey. It can help us, it can help you, it can help also vendors, for example. If they are searching valuable information on where their potential customers are. So we've got 47 responses. After elimination of some doubles, some very enthusiastic members of FIAT IFTA filled it out twice. So we got 43 basically. And then there was a little consent box. We always ask people whether they consent of disclosure of information, in the sense that I will talk about of all these 43 results, but there is a little disclaimer in the sense that if you don't consent to your information, which can exactly be pointed to your country, to your organization, and if you feel that sharing that information wouldn't be in your own interest or in interest of the others, you can still check that box, and then we won't do anything with your information. This is the results that we've got. So if you make a quick count, we end up with 43 results. 36 of these organizations were broadcasters. And again, keep the disclaimer in mind, but this says something. We've been around for a while, and we have seen the evolution, isn't it? That ever more broadcasters' archives are being, well, let's say, taken over or in a close collaboration with national archives or institutional archives, as I have called them in this survey. But let's not forget that globally, we're still speaking about broadcasters, and the membership of FIAT IFTA also reflects it. Now, let's go to the results. The first question is about preservation format, and as you can see, we've got 6 steps here. We've got the very first stage, analog carriers such as film, video, or stills. And then at the very last stage, we would call it, well, a complete digitization with your files stored in the cloud. Now, as you can see, there are very few members there. And the majority of the members, like 13, or the biggest part, I would rather call it, are in a fairly advanced state of digitization, which is quite encouraging. But we shouldn't forget, I think, that lots of them are also in an earlier stage with just only parts digitized. Even the very first stage is still a significant part of our membership. Then let's have a look at the content management system. Of course, this is a very, very general name, content management system. Others would call it MAM. But we decided to call it this way because some members are not even in the stage of a real media asset management. So what we see is a fairly big part of the results of the organizations that fill out this survey are in step 5, being we've got a digital asset management system. What I would like to conclude here, or what I see, is that the step towards a digital rights management system, which actually copes really with the rights, and which should allow organizations better to spread their stuff and publish their content on the web, etc., etc. Well, there is still a divide. We are 11 there. But I can imagine that lots of these 19 who just have a media asset management system would really like to make the switch into a digital rights management system. So maybe this can be an interesting result also for the industry and for MAM vendors. The third question that we've asked was about access. How do you give access to your archivist, but also to the general public in certain cases? In some higher stages of this question, we really make the bridge towards the public. And what you see, we still have some people that are in the very, very first stages. For example, just video cassettes on the shelf and films in the vaults that you can only view via Steenbeck's, so that it's still on our membership's radar. If we go further on, you see step 3, browse copies on network computers internally. I think that's the situation in quite a lot of broadcasters. And then we go on, and you see at step 5, the stage in which the content really can be shared beyond the borders of your organization, externally, and ever more organizations are also heading there. And then a question that me personally interests me quite a bit is metadata creation. How do you create your metadata? We've seen a lot of evolutions there. There has been, for quite a while, there has been some fuzz about automatic metadata creation, for example. And here you have hard figures. You have hard figures about how many organizations actually do that. So what you see is that at the very beginning, there are still quite some members, let's not forget that. Let's keep that in mind, that still a lot of manual cataloging is still being done, and there is still a lot to be gained there. We start slowly to have to involve the production staff in the creation of metadata. That's interesting, and it's a good evolution, I think. But also there, we see quite a lot of organizations struggling with it. And then when we really look all the fuzz about crowdsourced metadata, about tagging, about speech-to-text, image recognition, all kinds of automatic feature extraction, the facts are that very few of us actually really do it. And that's a lesson we should keep in mind, and we should question it also. Why is it that so few of us actually make that step? Is it because of the technology that is not mature enough? Is it because the organizational reforms or reorganization that it requires? Those are really interesting things also for the Media Management Commission to tackle. And then this is the question that we added this year. We wanted to know, as a Media Management Commission, we saw that there is a classical divide, and I will come back to it, between the broadcasters and the national archives or the archival institutions when it comes to the connection with your public. I've been working personally at a broadcaster for almost 10 years, and I know what the position of the archive within a broadcaster means. Now, I'm at the other side of the table now, in the sense that I nowadays work for an archival institution, a national AV archive. The scopes are quite different, and I'm not saying which one of the two is preferable, etc., etc. But as you can see, the step one, just featuring archival items on TV, radio, and own website not dedicated to the archive, is actually the biggest part. So that means that the archive itself, unlike, for example, RTE or SVT with their open archive, that the archive itself doesn't have a direct publishing channel via an own website. And that's, in my opinion, why initiatives also like EUScreen and EUScreen XL are also so important, because they can provide also to smaller broadcasters archive, still managed within the broadcaster, have a direct way out, I would say, a direct way to open up their archive. Now, if we look a little further, there are what I would call an avant-garde of institutions that really go on with things and that start to search for new kinds of public, search for new kinds of reuse also, and they're in the very large stage. And I think that we all know who they are, and I think they set the right example. But again, I would like to stress, let's not forget about those 20 on top. Those 20 who are still managing their own archive and who are struggling to convince their management to open up the archive. So with these results in mind, I started to combine some results. Again, I repeat my disclaimer. We should be very careful with these statistics, but again, if you fill out the survey, then these figures come ever more reliable. So I've made a distinction which is maybe a little delicate to make sometimes, but between the institutional archives and the broadcasters' archives. So what you see is that especially the broadcasters' archives, but also the institutional archives, are in a fairly advanced state of digitization. But as I already said, mostly at the broadcasters, there are still work to be done. I think it's quite logical that if you have an organization which is dedicated to archiving, you advance maybe a little quicker in digitization. It may seem paradoxical, because AV production these days is being done digitally. But that's the conclusion that I draw from this slide. Now, if we compare the content management systems with the type of organization, I think there is a very, very clear indication that there is lots of progress being made. We see the digital asset management systems, and they are in use at an ever bigger part of the public, of the broadcasters in general. Now, if you see, we've got institutional archives. Those are only 6 in the survey. That means that 50% of those who filled out the survey actually already have their digital rights management system. And that could point to the fact that, especially for institutions who are not managing their own content, or who don't have the rights on their own content, especially are in need of such a digital rights management system. Now, if we take a look at access, it's fairly clear if you see that browse copies on network computers internally, that's already what I said earlier on, is the bigger part. Those are our broadcasters' archives. And there is a clear distinction here. As you see, the institutional archives are, well, I would say they're quite a bit more advanced on this one. With the majority, 50% again, of those institutional archives in the very last stage of our scale. And we might end up adding another stage in the scale there. When it comes to content management systems, the conclusion is also, I think, very clear. As I said, ever more organizations try to involve other kinds of creation of metadata. That's quite obvious, I think. And it is being done as well with institutional archives as with broadcasters' archive. And we tend to be in the same stage there. We're all struggling with the way we create the metadata. We're all struggling with the way that we try to do some innovation on this level. So again, there is much more progress to be made here. And then the very last one, the connection to the public. Here also, it's very clear that if you are an institutional archive, there is more need to make a direct connection between the archive itself and the way you open it up. Of course, broadcasters, they have their classical channels, such as radio, TV, and websites. And, but still, I believe, if you see the biggest part here for broadcasters' archives is in step 1. The biggest part for institutional archives here is in the last stage. I think there is room for improvement here. And we all know, especially at broadcasters' archives, that we would like to convince our managements to give us ways to bring that valuable heritage content to the public. And I think, honestly, that a lot of advocacy can also be done here within the broadcasters' associations, such as the EBU. So, I've also done a little comparison with 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we did the exactly same exercise. We showed the results on stage in London at the British Library. And these are the conclusions that I draw. So, again, I repeat my disclaimer. Make my figures more relevant, I would say. We see in preservation format there has been a significant progress in digitization. You already see it between 2012 and 2014, and I think it must be quite encouraging also to Chris Lachnek, was pointing to the risks of that in terms of the cost of inaction. But still, there has to be done quite a lot. And another interesting conclusion when it comes to the preservation format is also the cloud storage. We've seen that only one of the institutions that filled out the survey has indicated that they are actually storing things in the cloud. Now, that's an interesting conclusion. What prevents us actually from storing things in the cloud? It would be an interesting discussion. I know that AV Preserve also has been doing research on the terms and conditions of cloud services. We have presented in Toronto 2011 a lecture of a British attorney at law who explained us all the risks of the legal risks of storing in the cloud. I think this issue shouldn't be off our radar. It should stay on us, just as digitization is, by the way. Digitization is definitely not gone. When it comes to the content management systems, I think obviously the MAM systems have been adopted worldwide. Also, you can see some regional differences. In particular, there is a lot of more work to be done also in Africa. But what we see is the expansion towards those digital right management systems. They are a challenge to many. Now, it probably doesn't sound as a surprise. We all cope with rights issues, not only because of the unclear situations in many countries, but also because of the unclear situation in many archives. So it stresses again the importance of gathering and collecting in a proper way all rights that are being created during the production. When it comes to access, I think the conclusion that we can draw is that still the biggest part of us still have catalogers who work on site. Catalogers are still working at the office, and they're a little less working from home, although I know, for example, at the Dutch Institute for Sound and Vision, this is already possible since quite a few years. But that's the stage we're in. Another conclusion when it comes to access, when we used to be, if we are honest with ourselves, we used to be quite a fortress as an archive. Now these fortress walls are being torn down. And overall, let's agree that's a good evolution. And I think we should continue with this. And then when it comes to metadata creation, of course, production staff are ever more involved, I've said it. And UGM, so user-generated metadata and automatically generated metadata are still rare, but increasing. And it makes the situations where these new technologies and new ways of creating metadata are being used, it makes them more interesting. And that's also why the Media Management Commission invited Theo Moisley and his team to Hilversum last year, and we will keep on doing that to set a nice example for those who want to bridge this gap. So, finally, I would like to thank all of you who have filled out the survey. Again, I would like to encourage you to keep on doing so. It will make FIAT IFTA a better provider of information to you. It will allow you to better position yourself and maybe even to get some arguments when it comes to leveraging things at your own management level. And a last factor I want to stress is that it is also important information for our vendors. Because after all, we're doing business with them. And if we provide this information to them, they will also hopefully come up with more relevant products and real products that fit our needs. And I think, obviously, we all agree with that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brecht, and also for being such a sharp, on-time keynote performer. There is time for some questions. These are the results of the survey you filled in. So maybe, as the members, you have some questions that you can now either ask to Brecht or to the other MMC committee members.
Thanks, Brecht. That was great. I was curious, just on the preservation format breakdown, did you get a sense of to what extent that was speaking to born digital content versus analog content that had been digitized that resulted in digital files?
Actually, no. Actually, that's a very interesting point, I must say, and it's not included in our survey. But I take it as a very good suggestion to include it in the next edition.
Yeah, I think it's great to see us using the timeline from when we started back in Dublin in 2010. And to your point, sorry, I didn't catch you speaking there in the light, but the timeline itself needs to evolve continually because things keep changing. Like, for example, you know, you've added in new points to capture, but obviously you're trying to be careful to be able to compare as well as we look back. But for example, we heard this morning about the need for migration within the digital domain in terms of storage, and I'm just thinking, well, it would be helpful if the specialists amongst us, industry partners and others, perhaps had a look at our timeline and maybe helped us to formulate more some of the questions that we need to be thinking of looking forwards, but also looking back, just to see that we are capturing the right information. The idea behind it originally was to keep it as simple as possible so that it should take you no longer than 5 or 6 minutes to fill out. That meant that it had to be understandable at a very high management level and not necessarily at a, you kind of had to, you had to know enough to be able to answer it, but not so much that you had to go into too much detail. So it's trying to strike that balance as well. Isn't that correct, Brecht? And you've kept it that way?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, obviously.
So perhaps this year a
dynamic.
revision needs a little bit of input, perhaps from across the, as well as the commissions and the members who are active. Maybe we look for some.
Yeah, of course.
I think that would be good.
Input for new questions is extremely welcome. Of course, I want to stress, as Britt said, we're trying to keep it simple. We don't want to bomb you with the 167th survey that you have to fill out and then go and search for figures, etc., etc. It should be easily submittable, and the answers should be possible to give them within, well, let's say 5 to 10 minutes at max. So, and of course, we're trying to stress the evolution. So it makes sense to ask questions such as which kind of systems do you use and can you name some, etc., etc. But it's difficult to see evolution there and to package things into a timeline. But of course, it makes sense. I'm not denying that it doesn't, but we want to really stress the evolution of it.
Yes, Brecht, you stressed it many times, but I really have to address my colleagues to tell them that with 43 answers, okay, it's good, but it's not good enough. In terms of the quality of the information we can extract, and when you were speaking of helping the vendors make themselves a figure, I think we need at least 2 or 3 times that in order to have something that is relevant.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. And all the figures, you shouldn't take them for granted. What I wanted to indicate is an evolution, a tendency. These are ballpark figures. And let's say 10 or 20 extra answers could really influence the picture. But nevertheless, I think the conclusions, also from my own experience and talking a lot with you throughout these conferences, throughout seminars, via email, etc., etc., made me draw these conclusions. So I hope they will be confirmed by further answers. And again, I encourage you.
That's a good thing. You're not a statistic company that's making interviews in the street and getting results. You know what you're talking about, so we can all see that. What you show, it seems very reasonable. So that's a good point for your work.
Yeah, but maybe I can still be surprised by what you enter as an answer. Maybe you don't agree with what I've shown. Well, it's up to you. Fill out the survey and we get more relevant figures.
On that note, thank you very much, Brecht.